Okay, it looks like everybody is in, and we're going to get started. Good evening. My name is Christopher Klein. I'm one of your presenters tonight, and this is the general orientation for all students going abroad for fall 2026. We're going to talk about things that apply to everybody, regardless of where you're going. So, like everybody in our office, I've had some interesting international experiences, and those things have made me want to help other people have um, worthwhile and rewarding travel experiences. And the places where I've spent the most time are in France. I lived in France for a year as a graduate student, and also in Sierra Leone in West Africa. I was a Peace Corps volunteer there. So my co-presenter tonight is Rachel Fellebaum, one of my colleagues, and when she comes on, I'm sure she'll tell us a little about her international experience too. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So congratulations on getting as far as you have in the process of going on study abroad. You've all made a lot of progress, but be aware that there is still more to learn and more to do. Um, Some of the things that you may need to do, if you have not done them already, is to do an application for your partner institution. You will probably need to apply for housing, or at least indicate your preference for housing. You'll probably have to apply for a visa. You'll need to register for classes. And so there are procedures and requirements and deadlines for all of these things. Um, and it varies quite a lot from one country to another. For example, in some countries, you need to do a separate registration for your exams in addition to registering for your classes. So there's a lot to keep track of. And I want to encourage you to be organized and to be proactive about things like this, um, because UR cannot get you extensions on the procedures of other institutions. We can't get you extensions or redos with other countries' governments, like for visa applications and things like that. Please read everything carefully, make note of the deadlines. If you don't understand something, then ask for help. And sometimes it can seem that our office is asking a lot of you and that you're getting kind of lectured if you don't adhere to deadlines and so on, but it's actually the experience that's demanding a lot from you. It's not us. So we're here to help and support you at every stage, and we'll be very happy to help you understand the different procedures that you need to follow. So tonight we're going to cover information that applies to everybody going abroad. For example, we're going to talk a little bit about study abroad insurance. We're going to talk about intercultural competence and things like that. You will be getting more details about your program, about your specific program at the meeting that is focused on that program. A lot of those have happened already, but there are still a few that are on the schedule. Um, and if you haven't had one of those, be aware that not all students have one because some of our partner organizations like DIS and SIT and SLU Madrid do a lot of their own orientation. So please watch for communications about those things. So we've worked hard to keep this presentation both concise and helpful, so please give us your full attention for the short time we need it, and we encourage everybody to take notes. So one of the things that we hope you will do when you go on study abroad is to be thoughtful about how you spend your time, and you can get started with that right now. What we would like to encourage you to do is to email yourself and send yourself a couple of goals, a couple of things that you want to accomplish while you're on study abroad. And while you are abroad, we're going to send you check-in messages. There's usually one that's toward the beginning of the semester, there's one near the end of the semester, and one right about in the middle. And when we send that one that's right about in the middle, we will ask you to review the email that you sent to yourself to see if you are meeting the goals that you have set for yourself. So I won't ask you to write that email now, but I would ask you to just jot some little note where you see it so that later tonight you will send yourself a short email uh, on the goals that you have set for yourself. And these vary quite a lot from one person to another. For example, some people want to build their language skills. Some people want to become more independent. Some people want to learn about a specific thing. For example, We've sent students abroad who are really interested in art, but have not had the opportunity to visit a lot of museums. And so maybe visiting art museums is an important goal for you. Maybe one goal that some of my students have talked about in going to Australia in particular is that if they know something about American football, they want to try to get involved in an American football club in Australia because that's kind of a novelty sport in Australia. But Americans are seen as celebrities in that area, so that's a goal that I've heard about before. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. So some important reminders. When you accept an offer from UR to take part in a study abroad program, you have agreed to follow some important UR rules. At least once before you go abroad, please open your gateway record, go to the materials section, and click on the form titled Participant Contract. So this is a legally binding document. It's probably one of the first ones that you've ever signed, but you have all signed it if you are here tonight. And within that document are links to other documents. There's one called the Agreement, Waiver, and Release Form. There is the Behavior, Alcohol, and Drug Policy Guidelines. There is something about our withdrawal policy as well. And among the things covered in these documents are that you agree to follow UR rules on academics and conduct. You agree to follow the rules of your study abroad institution. For example, um, you acknowledge that you need to attend class or you're going to be penalized. You need to take exams when they're scheduled, or you may not be able to take them at all. Also, you are agreeing to follow the laws of your host country. You agree to represent UR in a positive light and to be respectful of your host culture. And you also acknowledge that UR can't change the procedures or rules or laws of another institution or another country. And you also need to acknowledge that you alone are responsible for the consequences, whether they're academic or legal or financial, of not doing those things. Just be aware that even though you are a student, you're on study abroad, you are still subject to all the laws of the country where you're studying, and you're subject to all the rules of the institution where you're studying. So being a UR student or being a US citizen doesn't give you a pass on any of those things. All right. And now we will go on to academics, and Rachel will speak for a bit.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel Fellabaum. I am the newest member of the Center for Global Engagement. I joined last July. I'm the Associate Director for Study Abroad and Short-Term Programs. And like Chris, I also studied abroad and have lived abroad. I studied abroad in St. Petersburg in Russia and actually had a pretty tough time with culture shock, which we'll talk a little bit about today. But it inspired me to go back abroad, and I subsequently moved to Russia for a year and a half, and I've also lived in Ukraine and Moldova, but I've traveled a lot around different parts of the world. So I'm really excited for you all to have this opportunity today. So we're going to talk about academics. It's important to remember that whatever your priorities are for study abroad, academics need to be your top priority. So here's important things for you to know. It is a myth that study abroad classes are pass-fail. You need to take all of your classes for a grade. You are not allowed to take anything pass-fail. Number two, you need to be registered for a full-time course load in your host institution that is equivalent to at least full-time course load at the University of Richmond, which is 3.5 units. You should be aware that some institutions don't keep track of this or don't have a minimum requirement, like in Germany or Switzerland, but you are still responsible for being registered for the equivalent of at least 3.5 units. And you need to transfer back at least 3.5 units. So you may not want to register for a minimal course load. If you do, and then you fail a course, then you would not get 3.5 UR units. The University of Richmond has developed an online database, and hopefully you have all seen this at this point, to help make the process easier for students. We want to note that courses not in the database will need to be approved for any requirement for major, minor, gen ed requirements using the study abroad course approval form that's available on the registrar's website. In terms of credit transfer, Robbins students should consult with Faye Bell or Nora in the Robbins School of Business regarding course approvals for business and economics, both majors and minors. Other classes will need to be reviewed and approved by the relevant department chair. Hard copy course approval forms or email from the department chair or faculty coordinator to Kim Duran in the registrar's office should suffice. And this will be covered in other online modules that you'll receive later. I also wanted to know, we didn't say this at the beginning, but if you have questions, feel free to put them into the chat and we'll try to address them as we go along. Okay, so more about academics. How does it count? Before asking how study abroad classes count, it is important to know exactly what kind of credit you need to transfer back from your time abroad. If you haven't already done so, we recommend that you meet with your academic advisor to make a list of the UR requirements that you need to meet every semester between now and when you graduate, so that you know what you need from your study abroad. But to explain how classes count, classes will transfer back to UR as general transfer credit by default if you meet the conditions on the previous slide. So it must be taken for a grade, must achieve an equivalent of a C or better, no duplication of courses that you've already taken at UR, and it needs to be a subject that's taught at the University of Richmond. If you need classes to transfer as being equivalent to a specific UR class, then your first step will be to check the course approval database to see what people have previously taken and how their classes transferred back. If your classes are not in the database, or if the UR equivalency doesn't work for you and you think there could be a different UR equivalency, for example, a course that could be either political science or global studies, then you do need to do the course approval form. So part of this process, you'll obtain a syllabus. This is more available on some programs than others. You'll need to discuss the syllabus with the head or the chair of the appropriate academic department at UR, and then that person will decide how the class counts in the UR system. Again, RSB students, majors and minors, need to consult with FABEL or Nora Kostic about course approval for business subjects and economics. You would work together with the department head or Faye and Nora to complete a course approval form. And then that form gets submitted to Kim Duran in the office of the registrar. There's no specific deadline for the course approval process. When you should do it depends on how specifically you need the classes to count. If you need a class to count from abroad as a specific UR requirement, you should do the process, at least for those classes, before you buy a plane ticket or pay for housing abroad, just to make sure that you get what you need. If you're okay with getting general transfer credit or elective credit, then you can wait a little bit. Okay. Someone from the waiting room. Okay. And we have a question here from Jolie. I have a question about my internship program. Chris, do you want to take this question?
Let's see. I just started on the class listed. Okay, okay. But it's not a traditionally graded class. Okay. Jolie, let's talk about that offline. We don't send a lot of students on internships, and I think that this will work, but we'll have to talk about that separately. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to move us on because I know time is precious. So the next slide is about the Sustainable Development Goals, which probably many of you have heard about. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, are about guiding sustainable development at global scale. I don't think we have a hyperlink in here. You can easily Google it, but these are the 17 goals. These are from the United Nations, and as you can see, they go far beyond protecting wildlife and life in the ocean. The goals give suggestions to work towards all aspects of a sustainable future, including providing access to education or healthcare or developing sustainable infrastructure. We do have a Green Spiders Abroad program where a small handful of students are chosen or nominated by faculty to participate in sustainability projects while they're abroad, such as creating a guide for future students at the site to do a stay local weekend or exploring other local research interest. If you've been nominated, you should have heard about this by now, and we hope that you will participate. If you have any questions, I'm actually the manager for that program, so you can reach out to me. And before I move on, I'm just seeing we have another question from Celia. The gateway page for my program says that one class at the school is equal to 0.75 units at UR. How would that transfer? Chris, you want to take that one too?
So the way that works is that when you when the credits come back, when the classes come back, instead of being equivalent to one UR unit, they would be equivalent to 0.75 units. And so what that means is that you'd have to take slightly more than you would at Richmond to get to 3.5. Um, and let's see, the it's possible to round up some of your units. Uh, I'm not sure if we could round up from 0.75 units to a whole unit. I know that we do that. We have a lot of programs where the classes that people take abroad are worth zero point 0.9 units, and it's no problem to round up from zero point 0.9 to 1. I'm not sure about 0.75. Um, Again, I would let's see. I think probably the best thing for questions that are as program specific as these would be if you would write us an email. You can write to either me or Rachel, and we will direct it to the right advisor. So there are five of us who do program advising. We all work with different parts of the world, and and so this situation, the classes that you were talking about that are worth 0.75 units, um, there may be somebody in the office who works with those all the time. So we'll definitely get you an answer for that. Okay. All right. So we can go on to the next slide. So, my study abroad colleagues and I realized that no two people have exactly the same goals for going on study abroad. Most of you are looking for some combination of academics, fun, travel, and new experiences. But one of the main goals of me and my colleagues is that you will develop or deepen your intercultural competence. So, what is that? One possible definition is the ability to interact effectively and smoothly with people who are different from you. So why is this important to us? There are lots of reasons. One is that the world is more blended than ever. People travel across borders more, they migrate more, they interact digitally across borders all the time. It's becoming increasingly rare to find a town or an employer or any organization where everybody is of the same background. So intercultural competence helps us to function better in blended environments. Another reason is that it helps us avoid cultural arrogance, such as assuming that people everywhere basically think the same as we do. People from large, powerful countries, unfortunately, are at a special risk of this. Cultural arrogance causes a great deal of unhappiness and conflict in the world. And another reason why it's important to develop intercultural competence is because uh, it is becoming assumed that any truly effective professional is able to interact well with people who are different from themselves. You can go to the next slide, please. So, to know what it means to have intercultural competence, we first need to think a little bit about culture. What is culture? One definition among thousands could be that culture is the set of assumptions that a group of people shares about life in the world. And a common metaphor that is used is the one that you're seeing in this graphic, the metaphor of an iceberg, because just like with an iceberg, part of culture is above the surface and visible, but most of culture is below the surface and is not as easy to observe or understand. So I work with France, so I use a lot of examples about France. Um, and one example would be that tourists in Paris notice that local people sometimes seem to pay no attention to them. Sometimes they don't even acknowledge them. And that part of French culture is above the surface. That's what people observe. But people who live in France come to understand why this is. The reason is that French people make a very sharp distinction between strangers and friends. They tend to have fewer friends and to develop very deep bonds with them and to maintain the same few friendships for life. But someone you don't know is just not a part of your life, really, and you don't extend special courtesy to them. And that's not at all a malicious thing. It's just how it is. Okay, you can go on to the next slide, please. So how can you develop intercultural competence? How can you have smooth interactions with people in your host country? There are a number of things that you can do. One is before going abroad, we would encourage you to read a book that we're going to send you. It's called Culture Smart. So there's a Culture Smart for the UK, there's a Culture Smart for France, there's a Culture Smart for South Africa. We're going to send you these as an ebook later in the semester. I would also encourage you to watch intelligent TV about the place where you will study. With streaming services, it's so easy to find TV from the countries where you're going to study or TV about the countries where you're going to study. And we would also encourage you to talk with former participants and visiting students from the place where you will be going. So we're organizing orientation meetings and so on. And part of that is that we invite exchange students and we invite recent returnees from these programs so you can ask them questions. So while you are abroad, we would encourage you to spend a lot of time listening and watching and observing. And luckily, in a lot of the places where we send people, that's easy to do because part of an average person's social life is sitting for a long time in a restaurant, sitting for a long time in a cafe, and just kind of watching the world go by. We would encourage you to use patience with yourself and the people of your host country. There are going to be some times when cultural differences can be a little bit frustrating. For example, in some of the places where we send people, the ideas of time are very different. And if you are somebody who is always on time, or maybe you're even a little bit early, in some of the places where we send people, it's you're still considered to be on time if you're half an hour late, and that can take some getting used to. But use patience with yourself and the people of your host country if you find yourself getting a little frustrated by some kind of difference. And please stay engaged with the local culture, even if it's difficult. I remember in the year that I lived in France, my friends and I would sometimes say to each other, I'm just having a really bad French day. I can't say anything. I can't say anything correctly, and I'm just not having a lot of fun. And there was a temptation to just kind of withdraw, but I think that we were all happier in the long run when we continued to try interacting with local people um, and when we did not totally withdraw. And it's important to maintain a sense of humor. So it's important to laugh at yourself when you make little mistakes or when it's clear that you've misunderstood something. I remember when I was learning French, I was walking in a park with a friend, and we saw some ducklings, and I wanted to say, "Oh, look at the cute little ducklings." The word for duckling in French is caneton, but what I said was canette, which means aluminum can, and she had a really good laugh about that. And I realized that yeah, that was worth laughing at. So, but my best advice about developing intercultural competence is to try to find a good cultural informant. So, who is a cultural informant? That is someone who understands both your home culture and the new culture that you are experiencing. In my experience, the people who can teach you the most about our new culture are people from your culture who have lived in the new place for a long time. They will have experienced the same misunderstandings as you and will be able to anticipate and explain the things that you find confusing or problematic. And here's another example from my time in France. In the year that I was living there, I visited a couple. The man of the couple is German and the woman is American. And I was having dinner in their apartment. It was kind of a warm evening. And at some point, the man got up and closed the window. And I knew it would get stuffy. And so I asked, why did you close the window? And he said, because there was a breeze. And I thought, well, a breeze would be a pretty good thing. Um, but the look on my face showed that I didn't understand. And so his American wife said, his American wife understood that I was confused by this. And so she explained, he did that because there's an idea in Germany that a cool breeze will give you a sore throat or a chest cold. So without that piece of information, I would never have understood that interaction. So to summarize, it can be challenging to learn to navigate a new culture, But if you're intentional about it, and if you use the tools at your disposal, it can work and it can be very rewarding. Okay.
All righty. Um, okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about identity abroad, and it's something really important for you to think about. Um, there's a lot happening in the world right now. You may get some interesting questions about what it's like to be an American or what it means to be American. So it's good idea to try to reflect on that a little bit ahead of time. Stepping outside of your home country is a really good way to learn more about who you are. I mentioned before, I studied abroad in St. Petersburg, Russia, probably before many of you were born, and it was when the US had invaded Iraq. So suddenly I got a lot of questions about US foreign policy that I wasn't really prepared to answer, especially in another language. So, but it did make me think a lot about who I was and what it meant to be my nationality. Um, and who you are may feel different depending on who you are to start with and where you go. This can be a positive thing, and it can also be really challenging at times. An example of a positive difference would be that many of the best African American musicians and writers moved to Europe in the early 20th century because they were better respected there than here in their home country. Another example is that in many European countries, women have better protections and more rights than in the US, for example, paid maternity leave. An example of a challenging difference is that in some countries, any sexuality other than being straight is a crime or punishable by prison time or worse. And in some places, belonging to a non majority religious or ethnic group may come with preconceived stereotypes or discrimination. Differences like these are all the more reason for you to learn something about where you're going to live before you travel there. We recommend that you do research before you go to better understand how the country where you live sees issues like race, ethnicity, religion, ability, gender, identity, nationality, social class, etc. I also find it's really helpful to study a little bit of history of the relationship between the country you're going to and the United States if you are American going abroad or wherever you're from, because you might find that people from that country know about it better than you do, and it's just helpful to like be able to engage in those conversations a little bit more intentionally. If you find that the place where you will be sees some of these topics in a way that is going to be challenging for you, you should try to learn how visitors navigate these differences and where you can find any support that you might need while you're abroad. We have a couple of links here, and you can find these on our website, or you can just search for them online as well, of some resources that can help you. We encourage you to talk with a member of the study abroad team about any issues that concern you, and to also see these pages that are linked to here. All right, so let's move on to my favorite topic. Just kidding. Um, Travel accident and sickness insurance. So one of the things that UR does to facilitate study abroad is to provide everyone going on a UR semester or year abroad with travel accident or sickness insurance. Please have a look at our website on this so that you and your family are familiar with coverage before you go abroad and when you're not sick or injured. If you find yourself sick or injured abroad and you haven't looked at this before, that's a really hard time to absorb the information in those circumstances. So please do click through. The website is linked here. And also, I think last week or the week before, our colleague Jenny Stevens in our office has uploaded a document to your digital backpack in Gateway Abroad. We call it the IECL, but that includes information about the health insurance coverage, the card. There's a QR code on there that you can scan, and it adds the phone number to your phone. So I do recommend that you do that and leave a copy with your parents as well. As of April 1st, the University of Richmond switched our assistance provider, and basically that's the company that our insurance company works with, from IMG, a company called IMG, and the new one is called On Call International. So when you're saving numbers in your phone, On Call International is who you would call if you have an emergency, if you need to see a doctor, etc. So make sure you've got the On Call International number saved in your phone, and you've got the policy number. All of that is in the document that Jenny uploaded to Gateway Abroad. The travel accident and sickness insurance covers doctor's visits, x-rays, and approved medications. It also covers hospitalizations and mental health care as well. It also covers medical evacuation, which means it'll pay to transport you to the nearest place so that they can provide you with the care that you need. The insurance will pay to, it includes some travel insurance, so it'll pay to rebook flights if they're canceled. If you experience travel delays and you lose some luggage or your luggage is late and you need to purchase some items, or if you miss a connection and have to stay in a hotel, some of that is covered as well. It's very crucial that you keep your receipts for everything because that's the basis of how you will file a claim to get reimbursed. The medical insurance largely works on a reimbursement basis. So you would, especially for small expenses, you would pay for those upfront, get a receipt, file a claim, and get reimbursed. For more serious cases, for example, if you have to be hospitalized or stay overnight, you would want to contact On Call International to open a case so that they can liaise with the medical facility to try to arrange for direct payment. Okay, I don't want to skip over anything here. Another important benefit, and again, this is helpful to read in advance, is that if you are hospitalized, for example, or need assistance, the insurance can cover a family member to fly to your study abroad destination to help you. And it also will pay to fly you home in case of death of an immediate family member. It's important that you, if one of these things happen, that you work with the insurance company to make the travel arrangements. Otherwise, they may not cover them. I mentioned this before, but I don't want to skip anything. If you get sick or injured, or if you're the victim of a crime, or you miss a flight, call the insurance company, call On Call International, explain what happened. They will take notes, tell you how they can help. They'll give you a case number, and that allows them to call up all of their previous information on the situation in case you need to call back. It's also fine to call them if you're not really sure if or how you'll need their help. Like they have a lot of resources. They can recommend local healthcare facilities if you're not sure of that as well. Okay. Let me go on to the next slide. If you have questions about health insurance, feel free to pop them in the chat or email us separately. So health and mental health abroad is really important. I think Chris mentioned earlier, making goals for yourself. I would also strongly encourage you to take the time to make a plan for how you're going to take care of your health and your mental health abroad. Even if you don't currently have any challenges with your health or mental health, you're going to be in a new situation with a lot of new stressors, and it's important to be intentional about planning for that. Let's see, before you go, we do recommend, before you go abroad, that is, we recommend that you see a doctor, get any immunization updates that you might need, discuss any medications that you need to take with you, and get, if you can, get a general physical exam so that you know you're starting the experience in a good state of health. It's good to see your dentist for a checkup too. I'm sure Chris has stories. I have stories of seeing a dentist in another country, and it's a good cultural experience. But if you've got a like emergency dental situation, that may not be the time you want to have like a cultural experience. So try to get your dental care taken care of before you go abroad. If you wear glasses, consider bringing an extra pair in case you lose or you break yours. Same with contact lenses. For prescriptions, if you take prescriptions, when you meet with your doctor, talk about how long you're going to be abroad. And if they're able to give you prescriptions for the full time abroad, we do recommend that. It can be really challenging to get prescriptions filled or refilled while you're abroad. And I would not count on having them mailed. That can be really complicated and time consuming. So if you take prescription medications, do meet with your doctor to make sure you have a plan for how you're going to be covered for the full time that you will be abroad. And when you're traveling, this is important to remember. Make sure that you put your prescription medications in your carry-on bag. Don't check them, and you keep the prescription with you so that it's like a labeled bottle. You may want to decide which over-the-counter medications that you're going to take with you and confirm that those are legal in the country that you're going to. You can also consult with the Centers for Disease Control travel website. This is pretty thorough and will have information about your destination. So look at that pretty closely. When you arrive on site, figure out where you will go if you're sick or injured, or who you would turn to for advice. That's going to depend on which program you're going to. You should also think in advance about taking care of your mental health while abroad. So before going abroad, if you were seeing a therapist, be sure to talk to them about your upcoming study abroad experience so you can anticipate situations that could be challenging for you. If you're taking medication for a psychological condition, talk with them about how you will access it while abroad. You need to find out if it's legal for you to take with you. For example, some ADHD medications may be regulated in certain countries. So it's important for you to know this in advance. You can ask a question about whether you need to get a new prescription from a doctor in the country where you will be studying abroad and if it's available and legal in that country. If you're not sure about how to navigate this, we have some resources on our website. You can also reach out to your study abroad advisor and we can help point you in the right direction. Once you're abroad, monitor yourself. If you're feeling a little bit homesick, impatient with people who don't speak English, out of sorts, that's normal. That happens to a lot of us. And until you just adjust to your new country, it can take some time. But watch out for more serious issues. If you start drinking a lot more than usual, or eating a lot less, or sleeping a lot more, or sleeping a lot less, or spending too much time alone, you really should speak to the staff of your program or a trusted friend who will want to help you. And watch out for each other. Watch out for the same behaviors in your friends. If you have a concern about yourself or about another UR student while studying abroad, you can do the conveying a concern form through UR's website, and then that gets routed to the appropriate office at UR to be in the best position to provide help and advice. And then finally, the UR travel insurance that we mentioned, travel sickness and accident insurance, does include some support for mental health. So if you find that you need counseling or even hospitalization for mental health concerns, our travel sickness and accident insurance does provide coverage for that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I totally breezed over the escalator safety, but hopefully you get what that means.
Um,
So yeah, go ahead, Chris. Oh, is this yours? Sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So, um, so I'm going to talk a bit about safety. And so when you're on study abroad, you need to think about at least two different kinds of safety concerns. One is things that are the same as in your home country, and some of the things that what we mean by that is that don't do things abroad that you would not do at home. For example, sometimes when people go abroad, they sort of mentally go on vacation, um, and it's important to remember that study abroad is not a vacation. You know, you're not staying in a resort. You're getting out and experiencing real everyday life in a new country, and it's just important to remember that the world is not a gated resort. And I think that that's especially important for people from the University of Richmond because we have such a beautiful campus and it's a very safe environment and so on. But UR is very different from most parts of the world, and in fact, it's very different from most parts of the United States. We have very little concern about crime or violence or anything here. So when you go on study abroad, maintain your normal healthy caution and don't do things that you would not do here. Then there are some things that you need to think about that are different, and this is going to be there's a lot of variation in the places where we send people. We send people to places where the safety landscape is not much different from here, but we also send people to countries where maybe there are one or two factors that are very, very different. For example, environmental factors. I have a couple students who are going to Switzerland this semester, and if you have not been in mountain country before, then you need to be aware of things like altitude sickness, or if you're going to be skiing, you need to understand that avalanches are a serious issue. I also send people to places like Ghana and to the northern parts of Australia, and in those places there are some serious diseases that are carried by mosquitoes, so you need to be careful about things like that. The office also sends people to to Japan and to New Zealand, and wonderful places. But one of the differences there is that if you're going to study in Japan or New Zealand, you need to be prepared for earthquakes because that's a part of life for the average person there. And if you were to live in either of those countries for 2 or 3 years, you'd almost certainly experience an earthquake of some level. Um, Besides environmental factors, societal factors can be different too. For example, in some places, I have to say that in most of the places where we send people on study abroad, there is a lower rate of violent crime than there is in the United States. But crime is different from place to place. For example, when we send people to Europe, there is a lot of property crime there. There's pickpocketing and grab and run theft, things like that. So that's something that people need to be aware of. And when you have your country-specific study abroad meetings, when you have your country-specific orientations, your study abroad advisor will talk about those kinds of situations in the places where you're going to go. Something that people are surprised about is that some of the classiest places, like Notre Dame Cathedral and the Louvre Art Museum in Paris, actually have a very high rate of pickpocketing. So it's not necessarily in the rundown parts of town where you encounter risk. So, and other societal factors. In some countries, there are uh, important tensions between people of different politics or different ethnicities or different religions. That's something to learn about, situations to learn about in your orientation meetings. And in some countries, um, there can be there can be protests, and we see protests occasionally in the United States, but in other countries, they happen a lot more frequently and for different reasons. In some of the countries where we send people, the only way that people can influence government policy and things like that is by disrupting normal life. For example, I sent people to Rome, and a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the garbage collectors in Rome um, were trying to change their working conditions, and they just couldn't get anybody to take them seriously. So they just stopped collecting garbage, and that's how they got the government to pay attention to them. That's how they got the government to make some improvements to their situation. Some other things to think about are that in some countries, sporting events have a really different meaning than the meaning that they have in the United States. For example, if anybody's going to the UK or if anybody's going to Italy or Spain or Argentina or a lot of other places, you should never say that the most popular game in that country is just a game because people take it very, very seriously. And at sporting events, there can be riots between groups of rival fans, and that's something that we wouldn't really expect. You wouldn't expect to go to a New York Yankees game and for there to be a riot between different groups of fans. That just doesn't happen here, but it can in other places. It really depends where you're going, and we hope that you will learn about those situations in the country where you are going. Legal factors can be different too. For example, um, in Singapore, where we send people, they have very, very stiff penalties for drug possession, um, going up to the death penalty. Something that a lot of people don't expect is that if you go to Thailand, it is actually a crime to say anything negative about the king there. That's something that can get you put into jail. If you go to the UK, then carrying a pocket knife will get you arrested. So, so there are legal factors that are different from country to country, and that's something that people need to understand. So it would be impossible and unhelpful to list every conceivable hazard that you could encounter abroad, but what you should do is educate yourself about your destination from Culture Smart. Try to find a good cultural informant. Um, Take a look at the websites of the CDC and the travel advisory pages of the State Department and then you will be ready to make good choices about what you do and where you go while you are in study abroad. If you could go to the next slide, please. So, sexual assault occurs everywhere, including the places where you, our students, study abroad. In order to lower your chances of being a victim of sexual assault while abroad, you need to be aware of two sets of risks. This will sound familiar from the previous slide. One set of risks is the same as it is here. To protect yourself, you need to use the same normal, healthy caution that you would in your home country. So don't trust somebody too soon. Don't make yourself vulnerable with alcohol or drugs. Don't leave a drink unattended. Don't be out alone late at night. Don't leave a club or a party with somebody you just met. And don't let your friends do these things either. All need to watch out for each other. So another set of risks comes from being in a new place. And so you may need to do some new things and understand some new things in order to stay safe. The first thing is don't think of yourself as being on vacation. You still need to make good choices to stay safe, even if you feel that you are in a beautiful place and surrounded by friendly people. Something you may need to learn about the local scams that can lead to sexual assault. These things are different from place to place. For example, in some places, in some countries, getting into the wrong kind of taxi can be dangerous. In other places, there's a lot of drink spiking. A few years ago in London, women in bars were getting poked with needles that had been dipped in drugs. So thankfully, these things don't happen very often, but the conditions certainly are different from country to country. So again, finding a good cultural informant, attending orientation, talking to your study abroad advisor, these are all ways that you can be informed on these situations. And it's important to understand that men in other countries often assume that American women are easy because they really are portrayed that way in a lot of American media. Unfortunately, we have Hollywood to thank for that. One piece of advice that we give people is try not to present yourself as a short-term visitor because aggressive men in some places seem to target women that they think of as tourists because they think that a tourist is more likely to just leave town if she's assaulted instead of staying in town and pursuing criminal charges. And again, legal differences can influence some of this too. There are some surprising differences from one country to another on laws that relate to sexual behavior. For example, in some places, a person cannot be charged with rape unless they have used violence or intimidation to commit the act. And so in those places, having sex with a person who is unconscious is not considered a crime. So for all these reasons, it's good to seek the advice of people you identify with who've spent time in the country where you will study. If you are unfortunately the victim of an assault, please be in touch with a member of UR's study abroad office with whom you feel comfortable and with the local staff of your program. We will want to get you all the help that we can.
Okay, turn my video back on. Yeah, I just want to emphasize one point that Chris made about the differences in laws. Um, Culturally, there may be a difference in definitions of consent compared to what we think of in the US. So having a cultural informant or a local that you can ask, like in this country, what is considered giving consent? Is it going to someone's apartment? Is it saying yes? Like there's a range of differences. So I wouldn't make any assumptions about that and make sure you understand that before you go. Okay, so preparing to fly out. So the day before you leave, hopefully you are feeling excited and happy, not stressed. If you're feeling a little stressed, that is also okay and perfectly normal. But here's some advice for how to make sure that you're having a good day the day before you travel. So starting right now, you need to understand the process of getting a visa or a residence permit for the country where you will study. And you should apply early so that you have it well in advance of the day that you need it. Almost every semester, a student misses their study abroad experience because they didn't apply for their visa early enough. If you're hoping to travel abroad in the 2 to 3 months prior to your study abroad experience, you need to talk with your study abroad advisor about how that might affect your visa process. You should be aware that it may not be possible for you to do this and still get your visa on time. This is really crucial. You should also check with the airline to see how much luggage you can take with you so you aren't surprised with a surcharge when you check in at the airport. Those can be shockingly expensive. We do recommend that you have a little bit of cash on hand when you travel. You should be able to use your credit cards and your ATM debit cards abroad in most places. And it seems like recently these credit card companies don't require you to inform them that you're traveling. I still recommend that you inform them anyway, even if they say we don't need to know, but you don't want to get there and have your card shut off because it looks fraudulent. But we do recommend you travel with a little bit of cash, $50 to $100, whether that's in the local currency, if you can get it before you go, or in USD, should be sufficient just in case you get there and the ATM, your card doesn't work right away. Make sure that you know about anything that you cannot import into the country where you're going, such as pocket knives in the United Kingdom, Sudafed in Japan, or pepper spray, which is not allowed in most countries. There's a list here on the screen of some other things that you should carry with you. It says on your person, meaning like in your backpack, in your carry-on item on the airplane, not in your luggage that gets checked. So your passport and visa, local cash, medications, prescriptions, acceptance letter, arrival instructions, addresses that you need. And I want to emphasize your passport, like that is precious cargo. You need to make sure you know where that is at all times. When I'm traveling internationally, you're gonna have a lot of stuff with you. But I have like one pocket in the backpack where my passport always goes, and I know that's where it goes, so I don't sit down and like I'm flustered and put it in the front pocket or in a different pocket and then can't find it. You really need to make sure you know exactly where your passport is at all times. So make a plan for that. All right. Over to you,
So,
Chris.
yeah, to follow up on that idea, it's there's kind of an ethical obligation to keeping track of your passport too, because if it gets stolen, it's going to end up in the hands of a human trafficking organization or a drug cartel or something like that, and something really awful is going to be done with it. So please keep track of your passport. Don't lose it. It's a hassle to get it replaced, but also the passport that you lose is going to end up being used for bad things. Um, I want to talk a little bit about withdrawing from your program, and we hope that nobody will need to withdraw from study abroad. If you're thinking that you need to do this for some reason, please come and talk with your study abroad advisor before making the decision. I've had a lot of people over the years come to me with some kind of a worry. In many cases, the student has misunderstood something about costs or credits, and once the issue has been explained, they realize that it's not nearly as much of a problem as they thought. So please come and talk to us if you have any concerns about your program and if you're at all considering not going on study abroad. But if it turns out that you really do need to withdraw, please see our withdrawal policy page and share it with your family. If you need to withdraw for reasons that are beyond your control, UR normally waives the withdrawal fee, but we do charge it if the student has simply changed their mind. Something else you need to know is that if UR has paid money to your program abroad on your behalf, and the program will not refund that money to us, then we need to charge that to you as well. If you have circumstances that you think could make it necessary for you to withdraw and stay at UR, bear in mind that the earlier you withdraw, the greater your chances of getting the classes and the housing that you want at UR. But do make sure that you really understand the situation, as I mentioned before. If you think that you may need to withdraw from study abroad, we would encourage you and your family to consider purchasing something called tuition protection insurance. It's offered through the Office of Student Accounts, and the product is called GradGuard. It's important to read the information carefully to understand what is covered and what is excluded. But if you end up withdrawing from study abroad or withdrawing from Richmond, and you or your family have paid a lot of money in tuition, then this insurance will get some of that money back for you. Okay, so it's called GradGuard, and it's offered through the Office of Student Accounts. Okay, next slide. So what comes next? We encourage you to read all of the email that's coming from your study abroad advisor and from our office and from your program abroad, and to be sure that you are doing all the things that you need to do. Keep up with your email. That's our primary way of communicating with people. Remember that everybody needs to do some kind of an application for their host institution and for housing. Everybody needs to register for classes, and you may need to apply for a visa as well. You will get information on how to do these things well in advance, and please keep up with it so you don't miss important deadlines. So this concludes our presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. We hope that you have a wonderful evening and that you have a wonderful time abroad. Good night.
Thanks all.
Thank you.